Me too.
Yeah, baby. Hey, Ismic. Here we go.
Good afternoon or evening if you're watching from the East Coast. It's Saturday, May 1st, here at SpaceX's headquarters in Hawthorne, California. We are currently awaiting Crew Dragon's departure from the International Space Station and make its way back to planet Earth. On screen is a view from Johnson Space Center, just right outside of Houston. We expect Dragon Resilience to push away from the space station at approximately 5:35 p.m. Pacific time with our Crew-1 astronauts, Crew-1 astronauts, Mike Hopkins, Victor Glover, Shannon Walker, and Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Soichi Noguchi. Right on screen is a view of Dragon. It is nighttime at the International Space Station, so you can get, I guess, half of the Dragon right there. If you joined us earlier, you know that the crew is suited and the Dragon and station hatches are sealed in preparation for departure. My name is Andy Tran, and I'm a production supervisor here at SpaceX.
Hey, Tran!
I am super excited to bring you live coverage of Crew Dragon completing its second trip to space with people on board as part of NASA's first official long-duration mission for our commercial crew program. Joining me today is NASA Public Affairs Officer Leah Cheshire.
Thanks, Andy. It's awesome to be here, and we have got quite a night ahead of us. So once Dragon departs station, the crew's flight home is expected to last roughly 6.5 hours. Upon departure, Dragon will use its Draco engines to thrust away from the station in a series of carefully choreographed maneuvers, or 4 departure burns, to increase the distance between the spacecraft and the space station.
After that comes deorbit, entry, and landing, which covers all operations after the final departure maneuver. That includes trunk separation, a deorbit burn, closure of the nose cone, deployment of the drogue, and then main parachutes, and finally splashdown off the Florida coast, at which point our teams will recover Mike, Victor, Shannon, and Soichi. Dragon is targeted to splash down off the coast of Panama City, Florida, in the Gulf of Mexico at 11:57 p.m. Pacific time, followed by the crew getting picked up at sea by one of SpaceX's recovery vessels.
Today on board the space station is the Expedition 65 crew, led by JAXA astronaut and Crew-2 crew member Aki Hoshide, who just arrived to station a week ago and took over as station commander from NASA's Shannon Walker. As a reminder, just like during...
So, my pick, we're going to start Hunt the Streamer in 2 hours. 2 hours from right now, we're going to do Hunt the Streamer while they're deorbiting, and then we'll get a couple of Hunt the Streamers in, and then I'm switching back to crew coverage, dude. This stream's going all the way till the splashdown, baby. The hype is getting real. Let's go. Absolutely. Hey, you guys want to see some hype? Just on a quick side note. So, down in Boca Chica, this is also SpaceX going on here. Down in Boca Chica, Phil Botten took a picture here, and he took a picture of the service structure being put up. What is Hunt the Streamer? Hunt the Streamer is in GTA, where we get into a full room with a bunch of viewers in GTA. Everybody disables their HUDs and they try to kill me. It is extraordinarily stressful. I rage at it, but it's great entertainment for you guys. So check this out, right? Look, that's the service structure for Starship, right? Phil had another picture here. Look at this. There's jigs at the build site for them to build the service structure in sections. See that? They're going to build it in sections on the jig pieces. If we go over to RGV, right? RGV aerial, real quick. Ooh. He had some pictures. Check it out. See these jig pieces right here? This is a sub-assembly component area. So basically they're going to make that, right? They're going to make that 4 or 5 times over on those jig pieces, right? And then they're just going to use the big crane, the 11350, to take these subsections and just place them all together. How does one join Hunt the Streamers? I may be up for a game if it's in 2 hours. You got to talk to Pie Guy. We all know what Hunt the Streamer is, but what about Hug the Streamer? I don't know. Why don't you start Hunt the Streamer after they unlock? That way you could possibly get 3 hours of Hunt the Streamer, because the guy that runs Hunt the Streamer isn't coming home until 10. Or 7, yeah, 10 our time. We're go for departure. All right, let's see what we got.
Standing by for undocking.
Stand by for unduck. I know, Lawdog, isn't it cool?
Go, no-go coming up in a few minutes, where the joint SpaceX and NASA teams make their final
We don't
call
need to
for
do that,
Dragon to
Jimmy.
depart the station.
That's my
one of many
girlfriend's job.
checkpoints in the return that will continue all the way up until just before the deorbit burn, giving mission managers multiple chances to assess the weather at the splashdown zones and making sure everything is lining up before Dragon departs. So we'll stand by for that final go, no-go, but for now everything's continuing to look good for an on-time departure. And with that, I'll throw it back over to Andy and Leah in Hawthorne.
Andy.
Thanks for the update, Brandy. And as you heard, we just got the confirmation that from Mission Control here in Hawthorne and Houston and the Dragon crew,
of course, DJ,
Crew Dragon
great.
Resilience is a go to undock. So now we're waiting for the undocking sequence to begin, and that'll happen. It'll take about or less than 5 minutes for Dragon to separate from the International Space Station, where it has called home for almost 6 months.
The first step in the automated undocking sequence is for the
Camera's getting
umbilicals
fried,
to
Wessel.
retract. These umbilicals connect Dragon systems to the space station, transferring power, telemetry, and commands between the two vehicles throughout Dragon's stay. Now, once that is complete, Dragon will unlatch itself from the space station by releasing the 12 hard capture hooks in 2 separate phases. All that combined will take roughly 4.5 minutes, and then Dragon will be ready to depart from the station and begin to push itself further and further away using its thrusters.
Dragon's initial departure from station is a little different from any other docked vehicles like the Soyuz that rely on springs to push them away from the docking port. Dragon will execute 2 short thruster firings to undock using a combination of the 12 Draco engines around the base of the capsule, with the first breaking any stiction between Dragon and the docking port, and the second slowly backing the spacecraft away. We're expecting the call for the undocking sequence to begin at about 5:30 p.m. Pacific time.
Yeah, that's fine. They're gonna
And
use
once
these
it's time
thrusters
for the 4
right
Crew-1
there
astronauts to
pull it
deorbit
away
and splash down
and then
back on
back
planet
off.
Earth, they'll be heading to one of 7 targeted sites supported by SpaceX and NASA. All of these sites are located off the coast of Florida, either in the Gulf of Mexico or in the Atlantic Ocean. Spreading the supported sites across multiple locations helps to maximize the return opportunities for this mission and future crews, lowering the chance that we'll have to wave off due to bad
DJ,
weather.
It's pretty cool, man.
In the lead up to today, NASA and SpaceX jointly selected primary and alternate splashdown locations off the coast of Panama City, our primary location, and Tampa as the alternate. The selection process works with a lot of different variables, including the space station's orbital
splashdown.
trajectory,
About
what
5
landing
hours.
sites are available and have favorable weather, how much free flight capability Dragon has for the trip home,
Capability?
and the sleep schedule for the returning crew members.
We'll start with calculating daily return options based off of the space station's current orbit and Dragon's capabilities to maneuver and line up for re-entry. The time from undock to landing at the primary site can vary from less than 6 hours to more than 39. Today, our primary landing site gets the crew home in about 6.5 hours from undocking. Certainly, getting home the quickest comes with some obvious benefits, but we always have to make sure that the crew is properly rested for dynamic operations, preventing us from scheduling 20-plus hour days for them. Trajectory and ballistics experts provide the daily opportunities that would line up Dragon with 7 landing zones and split them into what we call ascending and descending opportunities.
Dragon uses its Draco thrusters after leaving station to execute a series of altitude-lowering maneuvers and to
That's
line up
those
with the
guys.
selected primary site.
See
It
those
can also
thrusters right
change to
there?
different alternate sites while in free flight if sudden weather moves in that we want to avoid. And weather is something that we're constantly looking at, making the final call to proceed about 2.5 hours before the crew undocks. For the Crew-1 return, we'll be looking at a number of weather items. Some of the obvious ones are no rain or chance of lightning in the recovery zone, both for the safety of the crew inside the capsule and the recovery teams on the water. We're also looking for wind speeds less than 15 feet a second or about 10 miles an hour and relatively calm seas so we can safely execute recovery operations, which includes landing a helicopter on the recovery ship to fly Mike, Victor, Shannon, and Soichi back to Florida.
They did helicopter?
Once Dragon is flying free, we'll have a
In the
number of
Gulf?
additional checkpoints to either proceed towards the primary landing site, head to the alternate, or select a new zone based on real-time
Quack,
weather
what's
data.
up?
These checks are happening all the way up until we are in the final hours before the deorbit burn, which is the last burn in the trip home
That's right,
and
Livid.
commits the Dragon capsule to re-entering the Earth's atmosphere.
And if you've been following along, the teams have been looking at return opportunities since Wednesday, April 28th, with weather being the major factor. We waved off our initial opportunities to undock on the 28th and on the 30th, with teams making the decision to pursue our current undocking and splashdown plan just yesterday. The weather conditions in the Gulf for tonight's attempt are ideal for splashdown and recovery, with very low wind speeds and almost glass-like
right
sea
there.
states.
See it?
This will be the first time we're bringing crew back in a nighttime splashdown, but we are well prepared.
SpaceX was able to practice for this very scenario with the return of the CRS-21 cargo mission, returning a similar Dragon.
Wait, G-Funky, look at the Aerospace and Science page on Discord, okay? You saw a Delta 3-second stage. Well, that's pretty damn rare, dude. There's considering only 3 of those existed ever, and 2 of them are destroyed. You saw the only remaining Delta 3 stage in existence. Good for you, dude. How did you know? How could you tell? How could you tell what it was, though?
Another fun history fact for this return, this will be the first night splashdown of a U.S. crewed spacecraft since Apollo 8's pre-dawn return in the Pacific Ocean on December 27, 1968, with NASA astronauts Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, and Bill Anders.
It's quite a while since we've had a nighttime splashdown with crew members on it. But again, like Leah said, we've been practicing this for years and have done extensive amounts of testing. If the mission teams were to wave off after undocking prior to the deorbit burn, the crew can remain on orbit for more than 60 hours before they have to come home. And after undocking, the trip home will take less than 3 days to either our primary or alternate locations. So the crew have 3 days worth of food and snacks on board, along with plenty of water.
Cool.
And as Andy just mentioned, for today's undocking, Panama City is the prime splashdown location, and Tampa is the backup location for splashdown. And as a reminder, Dragon does have the capability to change alternate locations after undocking from station if bad weather happens to move in. And we are awaiting for that call to begin undocking in about 3 minutes, well, 2 minutes from now. And as we mentioned, it should take under 5 minutes for that undocking sequence to actually occur. So we won't see any movement right away at first from Crew Dragon if we're able.
Do you think there will be civilian boats around the capsule again? No. Coast Guard cutters out there with the Dragon ships. How long till it lands? Then, boys, we're about 5 hours out, give or take.
Yeah, we should be hearing the call out again in a couple minutes here, and that will begin the sequence to start to pull away those hooks, and eventually Dragon will fire its thrusters to remove the stiction from its forward bulkhead and the station and begin to make its journey all the way back home to Earth.
And if you've been listening, we got our go for undock from the team here, as you can see in Mission Control Houston, as well as the team here in Hawthorne. About 10 minutes ago, got that final go to undock, and Crew Dragon Resilience radioed back that they are go as well. Hatches. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say we have some precious cargo on board with the 4 astronauts, but they're also bringing home quite a bit of cargo, additional cargo as well, over 250 kilograms worth of supplies, food and stuff as well, and experiments to bring back with the return to Earth.
We heard them addressing in the previous show. We were watching Hatch Closure. They addressed the polar lockers, and those help us bring home science and research that's been conducted on station that needs to be refrigerated. So it's a wonderful capability of Crew Dragon that we're able to get that back to Earth to be analyzed, and so that the teams here on Earth that put together those investigations can take a look.
And all that cargo is being stored in the pressurized section or sort of the capsule section of Dragon.
No, Dragon will use its
sometimes
thrusters.
We can store objects in the trunk, but later on you'll see that we actually eject the trunk.
SpaceX undock sequence commanded.
Okay, here we go.
We actually undock the trunk in preparation for re-entry.
Copies, we see the same.
That's the call we were looking for, right on time at 5:30 p.m. Pacific time. Crew Dragon and the International Space Station flying 260 statute miles southwest of Liberia.
Another camera right there. All the Dr. Pepper truck.
You can see a picture of Crew Dragon there in the center of the screen.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Umbilical demate complete and nominal.
Resilience copies.
And the first step has been complete, that umbilical demating.
Show us that
provided
picture.
Power and data from International Space Station to Dragon.
So now with Dragon getting ready to undock and the umbilicals have separated, let's go to Brandy in Mission Control at Johnson Space Center for updates.
Thanks, Eddie.
Hey, nervous?
Confirmation of the
Yeah.
umbilical retraction means that a series of steps have been set off. Right now, the
Look at
first set of 6 out of 12 hooks should be retracting. That starts just a split second after the undock command is sent. There are 2 sets of 6 for 12 in total. Take about 4.5 minutes in all
See
to
these? Those are the hooks. See those
unhook.
indents?
After which time the
They're little hooks that
Dragon
come
will
out
be
of
able
that,
to begin
and they latch onto the
performing
space
a series
station
of
on the
undocking
IDA.
burns to move itself away from the space station.
And then, I mean, I don't have the trunk attached because it's detachable, right?
Again, that first
So,
set of 6
Dragon will
should be
fire its
retracting right
Draco
now.
thrusters. Dragon will fire its Draco thrusters, which are these ones right here. These forward, see those ones? How they're kind of angled a little bit forward. They're not angled this way because they don't want to outgas at the station. So the thrusters are actually angled upwards a little bit. You can see them right here and here. And those first thruster firings will pull Dragon away from the space station. And once they do that, I mean, the nose cone obviously will be in the upright position like this, like it is behind me. But once the hooks are retracted, they'll do a single burn there, and then they'll do a bigger burn. Maybe, I'm not sure if the second burn is with these thrusters here, but they might be. After the hooks, the latches will disengage. Does your model have the toilet too? No. No, you had to pay more for that one. I'm serious.
First set of hooks open and nominal.
Vince, copies, we see the same.
Confirmation there. From,
the Draco
core
thrusters
and
are the
hopper,
reaction
first
control
set of
systems.
hooks
They're also the primary
was able to
thrusters for
unlatch
Dragon.
as expected. Now working on that second set of 6 hooks.
So Dragon doesn't have a service module and a service propulsion system. It doesn't have that. There's no like thruster out the back. It just has RCS. RCS is how it moves around. It's just designed to go into low Earth orbit. Now, could Dragon go further? Yeah, maybe. But you'd need some type of service propulsion system if you wanted to go further. But for low Earth orbit operations, it's 1, 2, 3, and then 4. And then there's 4 sets of these. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 over there, and then on the back side of it, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So they're letting go of the second set of latches here. So
Second, departure burn 0.
6 at a time, Cajun. What's the difference between the Draco and the Super Dracos? Well, the Super Dracos are behind that American flag right there. The Super Dracos are designed to be used in the event of a launch escape scenario. And that's it. They're the launch escape system engines. You know, other capsules will have like solid rocket boosters on the top, and the SRBs fire and they pull the rocket away. Dragon has what's called an ILES, an integrated launch escape
Halfway
system.
through that second set of hooks.
The integrated launch escape system is designed to, it's reusable. It's basically designed to be reusable. You don't need to make a new one every time. It works with the capsule. Someone did the math. If you put a Falcon 1 vacuum engine in the trunk with a tank, you can do lunar missions. That'd be kind of cool. They're all hypergolic trug. They all work off the same fuel supply. They're using monomethylhydrazine and dinitrogen tetroxide. Long story short, when those...
Dragon, SpaceX on the big
Oh,
loop, all
oh,
hooks
oh,
open and
oh.
nominal.
Current copies, we see
Awesome! Yeah! Yes, that's so cool!
Mike Hopkins, they're confirming what you're seeing on the screen.
Bro!
Dragon moving away from the
Let's
International Space Station.
go!
Dragon separation visually confirmed.
Bro!
And SpaceX
That's so
concurs.
cool! There's the hypergulls. They were firing there. That's so sick.
That undocking taking place at 7:35
Dude,
p.m. Central
dude,
Time, 5:35
no
p.m.
freaking
Pacific,
way!
while the station and Dragon were 260 miles above Mali. That
What
wraps
the
up
frick?
Crew-1's stay on the International Space Station, begun in November,
Dude, that is so legit.
and puts them on
Dragon,
a path
SpaceX on the big loop, depart burn 0 complete, nominal burn.
Okay.
Vince, copies, we see the same.
That is RCS, Mind Drive. That's literally what you just saw. You
And
saw the
confirmation there,
reaction
first
control
of
systems
several
firing
good
on a real
burns taking
spacecraft.
place. Again, there are 2 undocking burns that
That's the window in the
occur
forward
almost
hatch,
back
and
to
there's a-
back, and
there's a
those will be
strobe on
followed
it.
by departure burn 0. That's
Mali,
the first of 4 departure burns
M-A-L-I.
known as again departure burn 0.
Into the
It's a
darkness.
short firing of the Dragon's Draco thrusters,
It's so cool,
lasting
nervous.
16 seconds and increasing the Dragon's speed by just under half a mile.
They hot RCS? Yeah. Yeah, they're a
That gets
rocket
Dragon
engine,
flying away
dude.
from the space station and sends it on a trajectory that will take it up and around the space station.
Ringing the bell. Spacecraft's leaving the ISS.
Resilience departing. Have a safe trip back home and the soft landings.
Happy trails, hands.
Mission firm resilient.
Probably shouldn't say that.
Thanks for your hospitality. Sorry we stayed a little bit longer. We'll see you back on Earth.
Hell yeah.
Be back in a couple months.
I don't think so,
Space
Tron.
Station Commander Aki Hoshide, they're bidding Crew-1 goodbye as they move away from the International Space Station. Again, that departure burn 0
So
was
cool,
complete
nervous.
and nominal, so
So
that
goddamn
sets
cool.
the crew on their way home for the day. Again, we did have undocking right on time at 7:35 p.m. Central Time, 5:35 p.m. Pacific. The station was flying 260 miles over Mali. We're going to be monitoring Crew Dragon
Splashdowns.
throughout the departure sequence as it makes its way from the International Space
In
Station.
about 6 hours.
So wishing Mike,
5 to
Victor,
6
Shannon,
hours.
and Sawichi safe travels on their way home. But to take you through the rest of the departure sequence, I'll be sending you back over to Leah and Andy and Hawthorne. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Brandy, and great to see that successful undocking of Crew Dragon Resilience. You can still see it on your screen. The station is in an orbital
strobe.
nighttime. That's where this view is coming from. But very cool on the right-hand side, those 2 white dots.
Station step 4, ISS thrusters enabled.
Okay.
Houston copies.
Those 2 white dots on the spacecraft, those are actually the windows. So that is our crew of 4 inside, now beginning their journey back to Earth, having departed right on time.
Dude.
Dragon
How
Ship
about that,
Resilience
huh?
is now on a trajectory to move up and over the station before additional maneuvers will change its orbital path to take it below and in front of the station. Dragon will autonomously accomplish that through 3 additional departure burns to get the 4 astronauts of Crew-1 well away from the space station and on their way home.
Yeah, Sarita, you can see him out
Yeah,
there.
it's quite interesting that Dragon decides to move up and over. The way I like to think about it is if you've ever watched a track
Liam.
race, when they start the track race, they stagger the folks, and the person in the outer lane is sort of gets a head start, so to speak. But that's because the distance it takes to travel around the lap is much greater for the person further away from the center. And so with Dragon, what we do is Dragon and International Space Station are generally speaking traveling at the same speed. And so if we just move it up to a higher orbit, it'll move relatively slower than the International Space Station, which would just clear it. And then once it's clear, it can start to fire those thrusters again and make its way underneath the International Space Station
Radiation
and
is
be
doing this, guys.
clear of any potential sort of collisions. So you may have noticed that our average time from liftoff to the International Space Station is somewhere
is
between
pretty
23 and 24 hours. But when we leave, it's a lot quicker. It's because we don't have any hold points during departure sequence, right? We can just kind of undock and start to head home with all of our burns. It takes a lot less time to leave than arrive. Any second now, we are expecting the next departure burn, the second of 4.
I think they're dead pixels,
This
guys.
burn
I
will
don't think they're
increase the
stars.
initial opening rate between Crew Dragon and the space station.
They're dead
Even
pixels.
though this is known as Departure Burn 1, it, like you mentioned, is the second. We just completed Depart Burn 0, which was about 16 seconds, and this one should be about 21 seconds
So,
long. So we are standing by
those are
any
the
moment now
windows.
for that call.
And the interior Dragon right there.
And we are continuing to see a view from the International Space Station. There goes the Draco engines firing.
Dude.
That is Dragon. And those two white lights, the solid white lights, again, are the windows, and I'm sure the crew is looking back at the International Space Station as they continue to depart.
And we just got a note that Depart Burn 1 has started. As we mentioned, this is
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Depart Burn 1 is complete. Nominal burn. You are go to doff your suits per procedure 4.012. Cameras are already external. Reminder that ground will be deactivating the big loop following exit from the approach ellipsoid.
And SpaceX resilience copies. Good Depart 1 burn. We have a go to dock the suits 4.012 and copy on the comm.
So cool.
And it was over about as soon as it started. That Depart Burn 1 lasting about 21 seconds. And that came around 5 minutes after separation tonight. This burn will increase the initial opening rate between Crew Dragon and the space station. And we heard that the crew is now go to take off their spacesuits. So they don't have to wear their suits until it's time to really start the deorbit procedures. They can be in those comfort garments and be comfortable inside the vehicle. We really just want them to have those suits on and be in their seats for those first major burns as we leave the International Space Station, and then once again when we come back into Earth's atmosphere.
Yep, continuing to get good news all around with undocking, departure, and the second of 4 burns complete. We're now waiting for Dragon to exit the keep-out sphere and the approach ellipsoid. The keep-out sphere is an imaginary sphere 200 meters in diameter around the station. It's one of several safety zones set up to govern visiting spacecraft either arriving or departing the station.
About 10 minutes until sunlight, guys.
Before moving into the keep-out sphere, the spacecraft would have to be configured where they would not cross the imaginary boundary for at least 4 orbits, even if the spacecraft were to somehow lose control of its maneuvering.
The approach ellipsoid, or AE, is another imaginary shape, this time a 3-dimensional ellipsoid measuring 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers. It's in the same family as the keep-out sphere. One of the key differences with the AE is that vehicles outside of it have to be on what we called a 24-hour safe free drift trajectory. So similar, but this means that the spacecraft would not cross into the approach ellipsoid for at least 24 hours again.
Station Houston on the big loop. Dragon has exited the keep-out sphere.
Cool. Look, you can still see the thrusters firing.
Thanks.
Watch real close. You'll see the thrusters firing up there, over the right window.
Crew Dragon now outside the keep-out sphere, still inside that approach ellipsoid, and the next burn will be Depart Burn 2. That comes up at 6:28 Pacific time, so a little less than 45 minutes from now. That's a 44-second burn. That keep-out sphere, as we mentioned, one of several safety zones set up to govern visiting spacecraft either arriving or departing the station.
Is over Greece
Whether
right
those
now.
have crew members on them or not, we're always tracking what's in the vicinity or the neighborhood of our space station. So before moving in the keep-out sphere, we had to know that the spacecraft is configured to not cross that imaginary boundary for at least 4 orbits, even if it lost all.
Epidemic, you're in Panama City? Okay, so 2:45. Go out 2:30 in the morning. Try to get to the shoreline. Once you get to the shoreline, look low on the horizon. You'll see. Trust me, dude. You'll see it. Yep, we should be starting to get sunlight here. Oh, dude, that is so cool. Frick me, that's a spacecraft. That's a spaceship, dudes. 10 to 20 degrees. Actually, it might be a little higher than that, man, but look low on the horizon at first. It won't be anything above 90 because it's not going to be above you. So like 10 to 45 degrees, Epidemic. Oh, man. So we're making our way over the Black Sea right now. ISS is currently over Bulgaria. When do they close the nose? That'll come a little bit later, Cooking Fat. We won't be able to see it. Dude.
Heat, and I love this glow right now. The sun is coming up on the space station and onto Crew Dragon.
Man, that's...
Oh, that is cool.
SpaceX resilience comm check on the cabin mic.
SpaceX
Fascinating.
on the big
graph
loop.
shot.
I hear you loud and clear. Help me.
We have you the same. Good time check.
5 hours, Cajun. Dude.
The International Space Station and Dragon are just over the Black Sea right now. They're
I
moving
just
so
said
fast
that, Andy.
they'll see a sunrise or sunset is every 90 minutes. 17,500 miles per hour is how fast they're moving.
28,000 kph. They're making their way over the Crimean
And
Peninsula
these
right now.
movements that we see are camera moving. Dragon is moving itself, but not quite as quickly as we see these movements happening right now.
And just a few weeks ago, this
I think
crew
Jonathan
and
knows.
this vehicle had a bit of practice. On the first week of April, the crew had donned their spacesuits, entered the vehicle, and undocked and relocated themselves from one port to another. So that while they didn't
Yeah,
quite
nervous. Actually,
exit
nervous. I
the
didn't know
approach
that.
ellipsoid, they got pretty far out there where they
Used to
had
be
to
open for the nav
turn on their
equipment.
LiDAR
Interesting.
and redock with the International Space Station.
Yeah, it was definitely a dress rehearsal. All 4 crew members got suited up, got in their seats, strapped in, just in case that.
I think I've convinced myself. I'm heading over to the other side of Florida, above Tampa, to try and get it. Well, let's take a look, Fragment. Hold on. Man, shoot. Kyle, if I was down there in Florida with you, I'd go with you. I'd go with you and I'd stream the whole damn thing. I'd go with you, man. We'd stream the little road trip. So Panama City is where this thing is coming down. It's going to come down right around here. What are we talking about for a distance there from Tampa? Kyle, that's going to be low on the horizon, dude. Very low. The ideal spot to see this would be Port St. Joe. Seriously, if you could get here, if you could drive on this road. I highly doubt you can drive on this road with what I'm seeing here. Yeah, maybe you can. Down here. Cape San Blas, I guess. That would be the right place. You'd be able to see it. If you're in Panama City, yeah, how far are we from Panama City here? The landing zone is like right here. So you're about 100 miles. You'll see it. Yeah, you'll see it. It'll come in this way. It'll be coming this way because the ISS is 56 degrees inclined. So, what's the reciprocal of that? So 90 minus 56. Sorry guys, it's late. So 30, it'd be 30 something. So it's gonna come in like this way because that's the orbit that the ISS is in. It's something like that. So yeah, 34, just like that. It's gonna pop down somewhere over here. It'll be, like I said, low on the horizon.
Browsing the astronauts' Twitter, and as I mentioned earlier, Victor
about
Glover's
Lafayette?
birthday was yesterday, and seems like they had a great night. There was a saxophone, there was balloons, cakes, and a keyboard involved. But all the astronauts seems like they are getting along very
It'd be
well
tough,
with each other
dude.
up there.
It'd be
in
tough to
space.
see. Look south.
Yeah, I love, just seeing those real life pictures of what's happening on the International Space Station, because we know that they devote so much time and dedication to the science that's going on, because that's really why they are there. It's an orbiting laboratory that does research that benefits not only our future space exploration goals, but also all of us here on Earth. And so in their downtime, when they get to relax, some of them do play instruments. I've seen videos of what looks like to be a little space band.
Yeah.
It's a lot of the things we like to do here on Earth. They like to share meals together, watch movies.
Yeah, they, it's, watching them do the science experiments, it definitely looks like they're like kids in a candy store. They are absolutely ecstatic about sort of how the properties of experiments will change in the microgravity environment. Again, we are waiting for the call out for Dragon to continue to distance
boys,
itself
they got a
from the
projector up
International
there.
Space Station and eventually exit the approach ellipsoid. It's an imaginary ellipsoid around the International Space Station, measuring 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers.
We're looking for that to come up just a few minutes from now. It says 5:54 on Pacific time, so we'll be standing by for that. And this, like we mentioned earlier, with the keep out sphere, this is another place that you might stop on the way up and perform any checkouts before the vehicle gets closer to the space station. But on the way down, smooth sailing, we are clear to go. So we also heard the astronauts are now out of their suits, and I believe that was Mike Hopkins testing out the cabin microphone, which means it's not the microphone that is built into their suits. It's one that they're able to use and float around the capsule with. So that means they're out of their seats as well. I can only imagine they might be getting some views out the window of their home for the previous 6 months on the International Space Station.
No, Dad, I have it.
It's going to be a very exciting couple of hours here coming up with the crew returning. I should mention that throughout tonight's broadcast, if you have any questions, we are taking questions. If you use the hashtag #LaunchAmerica, we'll try to answer them here on air. We have one right here. Will we be able to see the capsule re-enter the atmosphere from the ground here in Florida, since it will be dark? I think so. We were talking earlier with the commercial crew program manager, and there's not a ton of clouds. If you are near Panama City or probably somewhere in Florida, you should be able to see a re-entry of the Dragon, depending on the cloud coverage.
When the capsule re-enters the atmosphere, it'll largely be over the water, so maybe a little out of sight for most people on land to see. But we did hear that there will be a lot of moonlight, so hopefully we get some good views. The best views that you'll get will be on this broadcast. We promise you that. But it won't be the same as seeing those 4 main parachutes billowing as the capsule comes down.
Discovery.
So we are targeting splashdown just before midnight Pacific time. So if you are on the East Coast, you might have to stay up a little bit in order to see the splashdown.
Oh yeah, Andy?
Now, this view on the right-hand side of your screen, that's Mission Control Houston, the International Space Station Flight Control
Center. I'm here for the duration, my brother.
At Johnson Space Center, and so we're still in integrated operations now. The spacecraft Crew Dragon is still in the neighborhood of.
I bring great shame. Who dat? Hey, win a Super Bowl with Drew Brees. Oh.
All systems on both vehicles are set to what they need to be to make sure these procedures move smoothly. As we've seen, everything going well so far, and we're looking at just a minute or two until they exit the approach ellipsoid.
And it really has been a joint effort from not just SpaceX and NASA, but the FAA, the Coast Guard, in order to make sure that the crew undocks safely, returns home safely. So it cannot be stressed enough that it really is a team effort to make sure that everyone is doing their part, and these astronauts are coming home safely.
Mac Jones, a good quarterback, Rogue.
As we mentioned earlier, this is NASA's first splashdown since 1968 with the Apollo 8 crew, which is one of my favorite missions. And this splashdown tonight also breaks a record. Not only has it been that long since we did a nighttime splashdown, but the capsule itself is now going to be the longest duration mission of an American crewed capsule in space. They're beating out the Skylab record from the final Skylab mission. That was 84 days, 1 hour, and 15 minutes. And so we're coming home with 168 days here. I think they passed it.
Yeah. If you exclude Demo 2, splashdowns don't happen too often nowadays, right? Most of the vehicles will land on land. The space shuttle landed itself. So, you know, while this may seem new, and we haven't done this for decades, we have rehearsed this many times, and the Dragon 1 program splashed down every one of its vehicles, and we were able to recover most of it.
Hey, and Bill, we trust
so,
we'll be
you know, we are definitely expecting a safe return for all of our astronauts on board the capsule Resilience today.
And we should hear that call to exit the approach ellipsoid any minute now at 4 kilometer by 2 kilometer by 2 kilometer.
Give us the views,
shape,
Leah.
Invisible ellipse, we should say.
The imaginary sphere,
yes,
right?
Yes. It just helps us monitor vehicles as they arrive and they depart. So Crew Dragon undocked
Dragon SpaceX
Strong
on the big
independent
loop.
shuttle. Yep.
Dragon has exited the approach ellipsoid and is on
Okay.
a safe free drift trajectory. Houston will be taking down the big loop shortly and expect ISS audio traffic to cease. Please swap your audio destination to Dragon to ground at your convenience and contact me for a comm check.
So cool. Shuttle doesn't need no man. Hey, the shuttle could have been rigged to land by itself. They could have done it. They just never did. Would have been a pain in the butt. It's an emergency contingency. I mean, guys, the shuttle basically flew itself into space automatically and then came down automatically. It's just the last part where the pilot has to fly.
Get Dragon to ground up.
They could have automated it. Just didn't want to.
Dragon SpaceX on
That's right,
Dragon to
Novus.
ground comm check.
Hello?
And SpaceX, this is Resilience on Dragon to ground. How copy?
All
I hear
right.
you loud and clear. How me?
They're off the ISS loops now.
And we've got you loud and clear as well. And if you could pass along the folks, we have a gorgeous view of the International Space Station.
Show us. Mike!
That is great to hear. Wish we could see it too.
Mike!
Thanks for letting us know, and we'll certainly pass that along.
Mike, show us. Mike!
Well, when you guys get our tablets back, you just might find some photos on it.
Excellent to hear. We look forward to it. Thanks.
It would have been fine, Clayton, if they needed to. They just never did. Let us in! Let us in! Do we get a new iPad password this time? Yeah, I hope so.
As you heard, Dragon Resilience has now exited the approach ellipsoid, that imaginary ellipsoid measuring 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers, in the same family as the keep out sphere, which we saw them depart earlier. And we also heard them that they said they have a beautiful view of the International Space Station. So our hypothesis was right. They were definitely getting some last glimpses outside of the windows.
Yeah, I'm quite jealous. They don't have the best views in town. Next up is the third departure burn,
2:56
and what we call departure
a.m.
burn
Eastern
2.
time, Velo.
That's coming up at about around 6:27 p.m. Pacific time. It's going to be 44 seconds in duration, and it uses a combination of service section thrusters and forward bulkheads. So this is done at the orbital apogee, the lowest point in Dragon's lower Dragon's perigee, to below the space station to start bringing it beneath and in front of the station's orbit.
And as you mentioned, that'll be depart burn 2, but it's really the third departure burn that we've seen.
Right.
Well, we had 2 short undock burns that helped us break the stiction and then begin moving away from the International Space Station. And then afterward, we had depart burn 0 lasting about 16 seconds, and depart burn 1 lasting 21 seconds. Those are bringing the vehicle up and over the International Space Station. And then depart burn 2, as you mentioned, coming up at 6:28 Pacific time. That should be about 44 seconds long. And then the final major departure burn is depart burn 3. And we'll expect to see that at 7:14 p.m. Pacific, or 2:14 GMT, lasting just over a minute long.
And SpaceX from Resilience, all 4 suits are connected and in drying.
We copy. Thanks.
Dan, you're asking why they go the wrong way to start off and then go around? How do you slow down in space?
And that was Mike
Go higher.
Hopkins confirming that they have doffed or taken off their suit.
So, okay, this shot is about orbital mechanics here. So in space, everything is backwards, dude. You got to speed up to slow down sometimes. And then you got to slow down to speed up. I know. It's all backwards. So if you want to slow down in space, you have to increase your altitude. So they're on the zenith port on IDA 3 right there. They were on the zenith port. So they just backed off. That's all they did. They executed a radial outburn relative to the station, basically just backing away from the docking port. We saw those thrusters firing, right? And what that did was a radial outburn relative to the station means that you're going to increase your orbital apogee, okay? What's the apogee? What does that mean? Apogee is the highest point in your orbit when you're around Earth, and perigee is the lowest point. So if there's a difference between, if your apogee and perigee are equal to each other, right? They can be equal. That's fine. That just means you have an orbit that has zero eccentricity. Now, what does zero eccentricity mean? Zero eccentricity basically means your orbit is a circle. If you have more eccentricity, your orbit gets into an elliptical shape. So, like the keep out sphere versus the approach ellipsoid. So what Dragon did was burning radial out here relative to the station, okay? They increased their orbit. They changed the orbital shape from a perfect sphere, which is what the ISS is basically in, to something like this. And because it became more elliptical by increasing apogee but not decreasing perigee, that's what a radial outburn does. Well, it does mess with the perigee just a little bit, but they'll actually slow down. They'll slow down because they're going to a higher altitude. So they're increasing their potential energy. And then, because the ISS stays at the same speed and they slow down because they're going higher, Earth's gravity will try to pull them back in and they'll start speeding up. But the ISS speed will stay the same. So they really just burned backwards and they just kind of sat there for a second. And then they appeared to do this, but it's just the differential orbits. It's the ellipse versus the sphere. That's all it is. It's just slowing down so they go out and behind it. Basically, you want the space station out in front of you, because when you do a deorbit burn, you don't want the space station behind you because you're firing the forward thrusters and your capsule's going to go this way and the ISS is going to catch you. You don't want to get into a fender bender with the ISS. That would be bad. Insurance would be, the premiums would be horrible. So they want to make sure that they're not near the ISS. So they slow down and the ISS keeps going, and they make sure they do their deorbit burn below and behind the space station.
Gets to take up some personal items, and we don't necessarily know what those are because they are personal, but those come home with them as well.
And we saw earlier today when the astronauts were ingressing the capsule, the cargo is really packed in there and trying to make full use of all the volume inside of the capsule. There is some storage space underneath the seat at sort of the base of the Dragon vehicle where they can store some luggage as well. So yeah, so keep sending us these questions. I'm having a blast answering them. Again, the hashtag is LaunchAmerica.
Does the second stage get them moving faster than the ISS? It inserts into a lower orbit, Nervous, and they basically do the reverse of what you just saw. And 500 billion deductible. Yotel, first facade. Oh, it looks excellent, dude. That building's gonna look so good, man. So, Nervous, to get to the station, you're basically doing the reverse of that. But what they do is they stay below the station the entire time, and then what they do is they put themselves into an orbit that'll make Dragon look like it's rotating. Instead of going up and over the station, it goes under and in front. It does the reverse of that. It's the reciprocal. So instead of this, right, the approach would go, the orbits would be down here. And then when they get out in front of the space station, they'll burn prograde, and they'll raise the apogee, and they'll make it so when they hit apogee, right, they'll be right here. So they'll do a burn when they're down here about 10 kilometers below the station. They'll do a quick burn, and once again, they'll make their orbit a slight ellipsoid, right? And what that'll look like from the ISS, it'll look like the Dragon is doing this. It'll look like the opposite of this. So instead of going up and over, they're going underneath and in front. And then what they'll do, once they get here, they'll circularize at the same exact altitude and basically station keep with the ISS. As they get closer and closer and closer, they'll be doing radial inburns. The Dragon will be burning downwards to make sure that, because if you burn towards the ISS, right, when you're out in front, you burn. You're going to lower your orbits because you're going to speed up, right? So they burn down and then backwards, down and back. So they'll just get closer and closer and closer. But what you guys will see is the thing will look like it'll rotate up into position and then dock.
That's as well.
Yeah, that would be cool. You have, West
Back
Coast servers,
to the
East
left.
Coast servers, then you have a space server. And you're gaming with astronauts. That could be the future. That'd be so cool.
This next question from Daniel.
Andy's a pro gamer, confirmed.
Space station. Well, this should be encouragement for anyone who hates doing laundry. You don't have to do laundry on the International Space Station. You
It's a
can
waste of water.
actually just throw your clothes away. So they don't throw them away after one wear. They do try to reuse their clothing. But because we don't really have water that can be disposed of in that amount. We recycle all of our water on the International Space Station, and so we don't have the opportunity to do laundry.
There's
So those
Dragon.
burn up upon re-entry on the Earth's atmosphere
Far
when
away
we
now.
pack them along with other trash and garbage inside other vehicles like the Northrop Grumman Cygnus, and we just send that back and it disintegrates in the Earth's atmosphere,
That's kind of cool.
taking
If
out
you-
the trash.
If you don't want to do laundry, just become an astronaut.
Exactly.
It's just that simple.
And I love this little view. You can see Crew Dragon there on the right side of your screen. Just a point of light continuing to move away from the International Space Station, with the next burn coming up in about 20 minutes. Depart burn 2, which should last 44 seconds.
There she
So
is.
again, that is the
off in
Dragon
distance.
capsule. It is quite far from the International Space Station at this point. Again, it passed the two imaginary
sweat in the vacuum?
areas, the keep out
Yeah,
sphere and the
absolutely.
approach ellipsoid,
Up
continuing
on the
to
station?
distance
Yeah,
itself
sure. Why wouldn't you?
in the vastness of space.
And we had an on-time undocking today. The command being sent right at 5:30 p.m. Pacific time, and then undocking coming around 5 minutes later. Those hooks opening, umbilical detaching, and 2 short burns separating Crew Dragon
long
Resilience
ago
from
was
the International
undocking?
Space Station, where it has
45
called
minutes?
home since November 15th. Teams here in Mission Control Houston, you can see flight controllers at their consoles monitoring all of the systems aboard the International Space Station. That's a 24-hour, 365-day-a-year job. And that has been for over 20 years now, because
Yep.
that's the amount of time that we've had people living in space. So if you are under 20 years old, there has never been a day that you've been alive without humans in space.
That's you.
Yeah, I believe the International Space Station just had its 20th anniversary last year and celebrated that. I saw some flags from previous views of, the 20th anniversary of the International Space Station. Quite a long time. It's been orbiting the Earth over and over and over again. When it was initially conceptualized, the space station was essentially built by sending a piece at a time and attaching it one piece at a time, and it's sort of become the orbiting laboratory that it is now.
Right?
Over 300 feet long, and
Yeah, of course, Herm.
if you look at the solar
Absolutely.
arrays, they're over 110 feet wide, so to speak. But it is quite a large laboratory with a lot of modules and a lot of science happening on board it.
And a good way to make it visual is if you put the International Space
Interesting
Station on
notice.
top of an American football field, it would reach from end zone to end zone.
Wow.
So that shows just
Okay, for the people that don't play hand egg, it's about the size of a soccer pitch. Yeah, soccer pitch, same size, or a football pitch, I guess we should call it, because you guys choose to call the sport where you use your feet football. I know, it's a weird concept.
are, with 2 of those departure burns having been completed.
And as we mentioned before, since undocking, we're going to be live with you the entire way to splashdown and crew recovery. So,
It's true, Switch you.
a couple of sequences coming up here in the next couple hours, but it'll definitely get exciting towards the last couple hours with the parachutes deploying and the trunk jettison and deorbit burn and all that.
How would you clean the windows on Dragon if they were like fogging up during landing? Why do you need to look out the windows when you're landing?
do.
Apollo capsule had no toilet. They had Ziploc bags. Yeah, there wasn't enough space for a toilet on that capsule. Yep. Yep, Ziploc bags. Fun story. Some of those Ziploc bags are up on the surface of the moon right now. Yeah, there's bags of poop. Sitting up on the moon. Oh yeah. Why? It's waste. Just jettison it.
It's performing.
That poop
how
is
they,
looking sus.
where
Out
they
the
are in
airlock.
relativity to the International Space Station.
Yeah, I mean, the Dragon vehicle does the bulk of the heavy lifting, and this is especially important because later
That's right,
on,
Stephen. Yes,
as
Cape
part of
Muffin.
their journey home, we'll be entering sort of a communications blackout period where the plasma buildup
5 years,
on
man.
the
Crazy.
bottom of the capsule will sort of interfere or prevent communications to and from Dragon. But have no fear, the Dragon is essentially flying itself at that point, and the crew can again just monitor the data that's being fed to them, and the Dragon vehicle can really take care of itself and knows where it wants to go and can make those adjustments to make sure.
Yeah,
that it's
who
hitting
cares
its
that we put
targeted
people on
landing
the moon?
site.
We put poop on the moon.
We just talked about they're out of their
They did
suits. They're
poop on
not
the
having to wear
moon.
them right now.
Right.
And I thought about it. We mentioned spacewalks for a second. So we could talk a little bit about how these suits are different than the ones that they put on for spacewalks. This crew completed.
Actually, admit, I contend to say that we should pick up right where we left off from the Apollo program. I think we should go, one of the Artemis missions should go to the Apollo 17 landing site. Pick up right where we left off. Go to the Apollo 17 landing site and grab one of the bags. I'm dead serious about that. Literally, go grab that bag of poop. And other components from the launch site to see how they wear it over 50 years. That would be a pretty damn good science experiment. And drive the moon rover around. Yeah. I'll pass. Oh, I'm sorry. It's not very science of you.
In a fire, but they are not the same as going out
It's
and,
not
and
very
moving around the
cash
International
science
Space
of you.
Station for several hours at a time in the vacuum of space.
Do you think the
Right, they
bacteria
really
in the poop
serve
could
to
survive
protect
that long?
the crew
No.
inside the vehicle in case there was a depressurization event. There's air being
Shut
fed,
down
and
those
the suit will get
deniers by
pressurized, and
yeah.
server can detect that on
We
its
didn't go to the moon. Yeah, we did. Here's a bag of poop from the moon. Boom. We could smear it right in their face. Wait, what?
really cool visors in order to perform the work that needs.
Wait a minute. Go to the Apollo 18 proposed landing site? Yeah, but there's no poop there.
Inside the vehicle.
Oh, look at that.
Another view of Crew Dragon. And now looking 4.2 kilometers away from the International Space Station.
There's no poop there yet.
Very, very
Good call.
Looks a bit
awesome
lonely, right?
view. It does.
It's just this
Thanks,
speck in this blackness.
And we're under 15 minutes away from their next burn, depart burn 2.
Dana is going to do because of all this blackness. Oh, the child.
And as we mentioned earlier, that bottom portion is not returning to Earth. The top portion, the capsule, that's the pressurized section and where all of our crew members are seated. And then that's just us moving the cameras on the space station.
Vigo!
Again, that's not a Crew Dragon making any
That would've been
super sudden
very
movements.
quick if it did that.
But that trunk at the bottom will be jettisoned and will burn up in the Earth's atmosphere. And that's a great space for bringing up things
supergravity would suck.
upon launch. The cargo Dragon vehicle now looks very similar to this vehicle. And so we can expect to see solar arrays in that trunk portion later this summer.
Yeah, the trunk right now, there's an umbilical that feeds power and telemetry from the trunk to the capsule. And so it is, it still serves a purpose right now, but later on, again, it is important that we expose the heat shield at the base of the capsule of Dragon prior to re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere. So that way that pica material can start to absorb and protect
There's no
the
junk in the
capsule
trunk.
from
Dragon ain't
the
thick.
extreme temperatures upon re-entry.
Everything has moved along right on the timeline for Crew Dragon today. We saw hatch closure earlier and then undocking, the command being sent at 5:30 p.m. Pacific. Separation coming just a few minutes
20,
later.
up to Apollo 20, Clayton.
2 departure burns having already been completed, and the Crew Dragon outside of the keep-out sphere and the approach ellipsoid now coming up on 4.7 kilometers away from the International Space Station. And as we mentioned, we are coming up on the second, or I should say the third deorbit burn, or not deorbit burn, departure burn. Only one of those deorbit burns, but that third departure burn will last 44 seconds.
And speaking of deorbit burns, we have a question here. Does Crew Dragon utilize Super Draco engines to perform the deorbit burn? And also, in what type of scenario can Super Draco be used other than the abort scenario? Right now, the Super Draco is mainly used for an abort scenario, right? Luckily for us, we've never had to use it, although we've tested it extensively. As for the first question, does Crew Dragon use the Super Draco engines to perform deorbit burn? It does not. It's the Draco engines. There's 12 of them at the service section, and then an additional 4 sort of at the bottom of the nose cone, which is currently open right now in the bulkhead. Those 4 thrusters at the top of Dragon, so to speak, will be what initiates the deorbit burn. So no to the Super Draco engines. We just use the 16 Dracos in order to maneuver Dragon, not only for the deorbit burn, but for all of the undocking sequences as well.
And after we complete that deorbit burn, as Andy mentioned, those thrusters under the nose cone, that's what's going to be used for the deorbit burn. We will close the nose cone and protect the hatch that the crew members have ingressed and egressed to and from the International Space Station. So we can protect that and for future reusability of this capsule. And we are continuing to answer your questions with the hashtag #LaunchAmerica, so keep sending those in if you're on Twitter, and we will do our very best to answer
But
them.
the life support systems are definitely contingent on how many people you have. With 2 people, it'll last a lot longer. It'll last double the amount of time than it does with 4 people. But I'm not sure what it is with 4 people, to be honest with you.
Burn 2 is done around 7 p.m. PST. They will have a meal. Their sort of single and last meal in space, so to speak. They'll have that around 7 p.m. and then do an inventory of Dragon before, again, we get to that final phase where we start to do the deorbit burn and splash down later off the coast of Panama City.
Sounds pretty fun to have a picnic in Crew Dragon.
Right, they already have the cool views, as they've told us, and now they get catered meals too. I'm, again, becoming increasingly jealous of the astronauts.
And these are a little bit different than what they've been dining on for the last few months aboard the International Space Station. These are MREs, essentially meals ready to eat, meaning that you can open the package and it's there. It's ready. Stick a spoon in it, no heating it up, nothing needed. But on the International Space Station, they do have a lot of thermostabilized food that they are able to rehydrate and put water in to restabilize it, I guess you can say, and that gives them the hot meals that we think are so important while they're in space to keep them enjoying breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah.
Interesting concept.
A quick question from Melissa. How long until splashdown? So it is currently targeted for 11:56 p.m. Pacific time. So depending where you're at, Melissa, it could be very late tonight or very early in the morning.
So either way, it's about 5.5 hours from now, but don't worry.
SpaceX on Dragon to ground. The ground is go for depart burn 2.
Okay. I'm with you, Cookie.
And SpaceX from Resilience, we copy go for depart burn 2.
And please let us know when you are ready for us to come back on board with video.
Okay, SpaceX from Resilience, your go to come on board, and we've turned the suit fan off. Suit drying is complete.
Copy, suit drying complete, and we'll come back on board. Thanks.
Not necessarily DPIC, no.
These views of Crew Dragon, now 5.8 kilometers away from the International Space Station, a little over 3.5 miles. And we just heard them discussing with the core, the crew operations and resource engineer here at SpaceX in Hawthorne, California, about coming back on the vehicle. So we have not had views inside the vehicle since they really began doffing or taking off their suits. We do like to give them that privacy, so they gave them permission to come back on board the vehicle, meaning we might get some views inside. But right now, this is a pretty spectacular view of Crew Dragon, now separated from the International Space Station.
Sooner or later, you should see the Earth come up here from
and
the
we're
bottom
looking
of the
for
screen.
that depart burn 2. We heard teams are go for
Summer
that, coming up around 6:28 Pacific time. Should last about 44 seconds.
ISS is currently out over the looks like they're out over the Marshall Islands here.
Depart burn 2, even though has the number
They're a
2,
little
it
ways
is the third
northeast of
depart burn
Australia
so
right now.
far. Things really seem to have been moving quickly.
Yeah.
Crew Dragon undocked about 50 minutes ago, and so far we've had those 2 depart burns. This will be the third. Coming up shortly, it'll be using a combination of those service section thrusters around the base of the capsule and those forward bulkhead thrusters, which are underneath the nose cone. And I think I can see the nose cone open just a little bit.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, it's that circular.
Clayton, what does the Dragon crew do to prepare for water or ground landing? Is there any difference between them? Dragon is first and foremost designed to land on water. That's really what you want. It's a little heavy to land on land. You'd definitely break it, and it would definitely be a little bit of a harsher ride. It can... Oh, excuse me. I have an Allen key in my hand. It can, if you really wanted to, but you ideally want to aim for water.
Today, the splashdown will be at nighttime off the coast of Panama City, Florida. Again, that is the first nighttime splashdown since the Apollo 8 mission in 1975.
The first trip of humans around the moon.
Yes.
Fascinating.
It's been quite a while, so very excited to see.
Where will they be
Dragon returning
re-entering?
back to
Could
Earth,
it be seen from the ground?
in moonlight.
Panama
And
City,
you
dude.
might be able
Florida.
to tell, but it looks like Crew Dragon has moved position a little bit.
Because it didn't burn.
It is maneuvering to the next altitude for this upcoming depart burn 2, making sure it's in the,
Yes, it does,
or I
Albert.
should say burn attitude, is in the proper position for those thrusters to fire and keep it on track for that splashdown off the coast of Panama City, Florida. And now we are looking at about 5 minutes until depart burn 2.
Dragon is 2-section, guys. 2 sections. There's... Okay. Take a look. So...
Now we've got a really zoomed in view. You can
Dragon
clearly
has
see that nose cone open.
Dude. Wow. That view, though. Dragon is 2 sections, okay? You have your trunk section, which is this section down here. And then
6.5 kilometers away
then the
from the
important part.
International Space Station.
So, the heat shield is the gray part right there with the 4 dots on it. Right before Dragon deorbits,
So
it'll
we
pop
talked
this thing
about
off,
the crew sort of
and
preparing,
then it'll re-enter.
And
This
performing
thing
bunch
is
of
in a
checks,
decaying
to
orbit,
make
so
sure
it'll
that
come
they
back
are
down.
undocking on time. But Dragon itself also, when it's
capsule's
docked at
nose
the
cone
International Space Station,
will
often spends
close.
time in sort of a low power
then
mode.
the capsule will
And
come
so
down like this.
Dragon also had a wake up call a few
This
days
is the
ago
part that's
and had
recoverable.
its own system
That part.
checkouts to make sure that everything was a go. The life support systems
I
were
did print
good.
it, yes.
The GNC, the comms were good. So it's been quite a journey.
Station Houston on 2 for Thomas for crew quarters.
Oh. They're on the ISS loop still. No, I use different filaments, Mason.
And
Whoa.
So I was saying it's been quite a journey for not just the crew, but
Bro, let's
Dragon.
go.
But we have video back on board the Crew-1 capsule Brazilians.
7.65
Again, those are
kilometers
the
a second,
three touchscreen
429
displays that I
kilometers
mentioned
in
earlier.
altitude.
You'll notice at the bottom there are a bunch of
So these are the orbital parameters. Let me take a look. So 429.5 kilometers apogee, 421.9 kilometer perigee. Are the suits empty? The suits are empty!
as we As we know,
No,
all
Reagan,
of
they're
those
off of,
things are
Think Geek,
autonomous.
I think it is.
Those chutes should deploy on their own, and the
I thought they were in the
chutes should be
suits.
cut
They were
as
empty.
well on their own to prevent the capsule from moving any
That
more
is very
in the water.
sus.
However, those buttons are there just in case. We always
Low
like to
on
have
the
backup.
horizon
We call it
arsenal,
fault
if at all.
tolerance.
Probably not, though.
So the crew is able to initiate both chute deployment and cutting those chutes if necessary.
Bro.
This view inside Crew Dragon Resilience looks like Victor Glover's in the background over there
There's nobody in
getting
the
bites
suits.
to eat. And it looks like we have people in the seats, but not quite. Those are just the suits.
I had to take a second look because I thought that they were also in the suits as well.
Right.
They are hooked up to the umbilicals and we're drying, and we got confirmation a few minutes ago that the drying has been complete. But yes, I had to. I took a quick second because one of them had the visors down. I saw, or maybe it was the backdrop of the
That's
back of the
so
helmet,
sketch.
Yes.
Suits are in place. There's no one in them right now. The crew is.
What happened?
Looks like they are chatting about or
No, it's the
getting ready
SpaceX's own
for
thing,
the
Clayton.
next departure
it's
burn.
phenolic impregnated carbon ablator, dude. It's like charcoal.
Yes,
almost.
that's very funny. I mean, that's the best place to store the suits. Absolutely.
Makes sense.
That's awesome. Do you think we'll be able to see the reentry in Dallas
And those are
Fort
the
Worth?
three
It'd be
displays
really
that we were
low
talking
on the
about.
horizon,
Those are touch screens,
Panta.
and in the center one you can see the Earth, and they are able to monitor where Crew Dragon is in relativity to the International Space Station, in relation to their splashdown location.
Is the
They're able
splashdown
to
in
monitor
5.5
burns,
hours?
and as we mentioned, we've got one coming up in just about 2 minutes. That'll be Depart Burn 2, lasting 44 seconds.
And that is the Dragon vehicle that, again, the crew members that we just saw, they are in that vehicle and are in space right now.
I didn't hear the context.
Continuing
Reagan.
to make their way back to Earth.
Oh,
This vehicle has been in
you lost
space since November 15th of last year. And after about a 6-month stay, it's finally making its way home.
And we have about 1 minute until Depart Burn 2. The International Space Station, that's where the view was coming from. This one back inside the capsule.
That's
But
so
they are
cool.
both flying
Vic, that doesn't look comfortable, man.
northeast of New Zealand, about 267 statute miles.
Vic,
Of
that
course,
don't look
Crew Dragon
comfortable.
just
You
a
all
few
right?
miles off of that.
My man's like this.
We're standing by for Depart Burn 2. And there's Soichi Noguchi in the background. Looks like this might be their dinner, their evening meal, or snack at least.
Oh, Mike's talking.
Oh, we just saw that last shot was Mike Hopkins, and then right before him, we saw Victor Glover to the right-hand side. Interesting thing about this vehicle, later on this year, we'll launch
Again, Mike, dude.
the astronauts as part of the Crew-3
Built like
program.
tanks, bro.
This capsule will be the capsule that they will be sitting in, so it'll be refurbished when it lands. Make sure that everything is working as planned,
There's
and then we
people
will
on
send
that.
this back up later on this fall.
Frick, dude.
And as you saw with Crew Dragon Endeavour, the capsule does not change its name once it has been named. Crew 2, their capsule was dubbed Endeavour by Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley last year on the Demo 2 mission. And Crew 1 named this capsule Resilience, so those names will live along with the vehicles.
Dragon, SpaceX, burn complete, nominal burn.
All right. That's...
And SpaceX, Resilience copies.
the second...
That was Depart Burn 2, a 44-second burn, exactly where we needed to be, coming at 6:28 p.m. Pacific time, using a combination of those service section and forward bulkhead thrusters.
Really, Thomas? Huh. Yeah. Do we know any
That was
police or
done at the
authorities that will
orbital
prevent the blow party
apogee,
this
which
time?
is
Yeah, they're
the
called
highest
Coast
point in
Guard.
Dragon's orbit, and it's lowering the perigee, the lowest part in the orbit, to below the space station. So those first burns took us up and over the space station. This will take us down and under
Yeah,
it.
Brian.
This will start bringing it beneath and in front of the station's orbit. And then, as we've seen, the crew has begun having their last meal on Dragon
A bit early.
before returning to Earth, but how can you tell somebody when they're hungry not to eat?
They have MREs, but they also have some snacks on board as well. I'm not sure what the snacks are, but they must be good. At about 7:14 p.m. Pacific time, we'll have the fourth and final departure burn. It's called departure burn
Okay,
3,
that's
but
just
it is the
sketch.
fourth one.
It's
And
just
that
a little
will
sus
put the
right
Dragon
there.
roughly co-elliptic with the International Space Station, just 10 kilometers beneath it the entire way around the Earth.
And it's
Yeah,
now
Xeon,
6:30
very, very, very
p.m.
minuscule.
Pacific time, meaning it has been exactly 1 hour since the undock command was issued to Crew Dragon. Everything moving on time and on schedule so far, with Crew Dragon's undocking and those 2 short burns to break the stiction, and then 3 departure burns having been completed so far, with the 4th, which is known as departure burn 3, left to go.
That's correct,
coming
Tech.
up, as you mentioned, Andy, at 7:14 p.m. Pacific time. So we've got about 45 minutes until that depart burn
know,
3.
Paul,
It'll be the
maybe.
longest of the burns that we've seen so far at 61 seconds, just over a minute. But it's nothing in comparison to that 16.5-minute deorbit burn that we'll see later tonight.
Right. And once we start that deorbit burn, we're committed to making sure that Dragon is splashing down safely. We have a primary site, Panama City, off the coast of Panama City. We also have the alternate site off the coast of Tampa.
How big is Dragon?
We have personnel and
The
ships
size of a short
boats
school
standing
bus?
by to make sure that all of the recovery operations are done smoothly and quickly to make sure that the crew is safely egressed from the capsule and attended to, and make their journey
Pretty
back
much,
to
Barrow.
Earth a very pleasant one.
This view of Crew Dragon Resilience floating in space, targeted for a splashdown off the coast of Panama City, Florida. And these views are coming from the
Hunt, the
International
streamer's
Space
gonna be
Station.
in between, Barrow.
And now that the Crew Dragon has departed, we had 11 astronauts and cosmonauts on board for a week there. And we're back down to 7 crew members aboard the orbiting laboratory. That's NASA's Mark Vande Hei, Roscosmos, Oleg Novitsky, and Pyotr Dubrov, as well as the Crew 2 astronauts who just arrived last week. That's Shane Kimbrough, Megan MacArthur of NASA,
Aki Hoshide.
Aki Hoshide of Japan
And
Aerospace
Thomas
Exploration
Pesquet.
Agency, and Thomas Pesquet of the European Space Agency. So
That's so cool,
nothing
dude.
short of an international space station.
Right.
How much time between the burn and the re-entry? It'll take about 45 minutes, Swishio.
The International Space Station is just to the
When is it too late to change locations? Pretty much until the deorbit burn. When you do the deorbit burn, you're committed. That's pretty much it. So make sure you're sure.
And as we mentioned, that deorbit burn is what really brings us home, commits us to coming home and splashing down at that very specific location off the coast of Panama City. But at this point in the orbit, we could change that if we needed to. The Crew Dragon can be reprogrammed with the burns necessary in case we needed to go to our alternate splashdown site, which currently is Tampa, or off the coast of Tampa, I should say, or any other splashdown sites if necessary. If some weather were to move in. So it's nice to have that flexibility with Crew Dragon on these deorbits. But everything looking good in that primary splashdown site. And again, as we mentioned, the first nighttime splashdown of a commercial crew mission, and the first for NASA since 1968.
Right. And you bring up an important part, the constant monitoring of weather and, the landing sites. We talked to NASA's commercial crew program manager, Steve Stitch, earlier, and one of the things he was emphasizing was
What's that,
it's
Thomas?
constantly monitoring weather. We looked at weather on the 28th and
Whoa.
decided to wave off. We looked at weather yesterday
That's
on the
cool,
30th,
man.
decided to wave off until the sea states and winds were in an ideal condition for the crew to return safely. So
Yeah, Squishton, they're too coarse of an adjustment. It would be like using a Saturn V F1 engine for an orbiter maneuvering engine. The Super Dracos are, you can throttle them if you really want to, but that's not really what they're designed for, man. They're a launch escape system engine.
nighttime splashdown. So the crew has, again, begun eating their last meal in space before returning home. Next up, we are awaiting the 4th and final departure burn 3, called departure burn 3. The thrusters, we used a combination of service section and the forward bulkhead thrusters. again lasting about a minute, 61 seconds. This will circularize Dragon's orbit and put it roughly co-elliptic with the station, approximately 10 kilometers lower in altitude. And while we wait, let's check in with Brandy Dean at the Johnson Flight Control Center. Brandy?
Randy?
Thanks so much, Andy. Things have quieted down a little bit around here, but the team is still watching, following along with the Dragon as it makes its way away from the International Space Station. They're led tonight by Flight Director Anthony Varia. Since the Dragon's departure, the team here in Houston does have a few roles to play. The TOPO, or Trajectory Operations and Planning Officer, is continuing to monitor Dragon's path on the lookout for any conjunctions. That's a chance of any space debris crossing the Dragon's path and causing an issue during their flight home. We also have representatives from NASA's Flight Operations Directorate on console. They serve as an information clearinghouse for all NASA's personnel who are supporting splashdown. And they also provide input should any changes be needed to be made to the crew's plan. There's also our Spaceflight Meteorology Group. They're actively providing weather data to the joint NASA and SpaceX teams as we keep an eye on the area for splashdown today. And finally, our LSO, or Landing Support Officer, is on standby in the event we run into any major issues that would cause Dragon to end up at an unsupported splashdown location, where we'd call up support from our Department of Defense colleagues. So we'll continue to monitor from here in Mission Control Houston, and I'll send it back to you, Leah and Andy in Hawthorne.
So they only use the forward-facing Dracos for
And
orbital
thank
maneuvering?
you for the
No, they use
update,
all the
Brandy.
thrusters.
While the crew eats and we...
They use all the thrusters for orbital maneuvering. Those forward-facing ones are the ones they use to deorbit with.
So after Crew Dragon Resilience has re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, a series of parachutes will deploy to slow the spacecraft's descent. First will be the 2 drogue chutes, followed by the 4 main chutes to guide Crew Dragon to its first contact with Earth since launching on November 15th of last year. The 2 drogue chutes are sort of conical in nature, and then the main chutes are orange and white. Dragon will automatically deploy these parachutes when different pressures and position sensors on the capsule detect they are at the right speed and altitude.
Vehicle velocity at drogue deploy is approximately 350 miles per hour and deploy at about 18,000 feet. Vehicle velocity at the main parachute deploy is approximately 119 miles per hour, so you can see those drogues have already done quite a good job at slowing it down, and they deploy at about 6,500 feet. And when the Crew Dragon splashes down in the water, the velocity of the vehicle should be approximately 16 miles per hour. So the highest G-load the crew will experience during re-entry is around 3 to 5 Gs.
That's about what they experience on ascent as well. So Crew Dragon's primary heat shield is comprised of a material known as Pica 3.0, which stands for Phenolic Impregnated Carbon Ablator. First-gen Pica was developed by NASA for studying and sampling comets within our solar systems.
SpaceX partnered with NASA to develop Pica X, which was the second-generation product used on all of Dragon 1 CRS missions that successfully resupplied the space station on 20 missions. Pica 3.0 was developed specifically for use on Dragon 2, the crew and the cargo versions, with enhanced structural and thermal properties that optimized the heat shield and drove down cost and mass.
The remainder of Crew Dragon capsule is comprised primarily of SpaceX proprietary ablative material. It's another class of thermal protection which is lighter weight versus Pica and protects the underlying composite structure during re-entry to ensure the structural capabilities are maintained.
So no
and while Crew Dragon will experience temperatures well over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit during peak re-entry conditions, the characteristics of the TPS, or the thermal protection systems, coupled with the Eclipse, which is the environmental cooling and life support system in the pressurized interior, will ensure that Mike, Victor, Shannon, and Suichi stay cool and comfortable during all phases of re-entry through splashdown.
Yeah, the Pica material is quite interesting. It has the density of about balsa wood, and for those that have taken any type of martial arts, balsa wood is that very lightweight sort of training board that you start to break when you're first entering martial arts. So that material, that very not very dense material, is able to shield and protect the capsule and the astronauts from over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit of entry temperatures. It's pretty wild.
But not exactly. It wasn't phenolic.
I had the the opportunity to hold one of those tiles
Yeah.
when I was at Kennedy Space Center one time, and it was surprisingly very light. I was shocked, and I saw a demonstration of someone with a blowtorch and had their hand on the other side,
Oh boy.
and heating up the tile, and we're perfectly fine. So it's fascinating.
So the way that that's comprised is the base of the capsule is made of carbon fiber, and then there is an epoxy or sort of an adhesive, and then you're putting these pica tiles on the bottom of it, and so that is what will enter first, so to speak, when we have the Dragon capsule re-enter the Earth's
Andy
atmosphere, and that's
does
taking the bulk of
PR
the
for SpaceX
friction
as well,
and heat
anyway.
as the Dragon capsule interacts with the atmosphere.
So, guys, okay. Anytime something burns, it releases fumes, okay? So this is the phenolic impregnated carbon ablator is I don't know why they just don't say it this way, but so whenever you burn something, like say you have a fire going, there's fumes coming off of it, right? That's basically how a heat shield works, okay? So when the capsule's coming in, that the pica is out in front, it's on the heat shield. And what happens is air gets compressed up against that heat shield, and it gets compressed and it heats up. Whenever you compress something, it heats up per the ideal gas law. So, basically, which states higher pressure, higher temperature, lower pressure, lower temperature, right? So, when that thing hits, the air gets so compressed and it gets so hot that it ionizes, it rips it apart, and that creates plasma, and that plasma can accumulate, kind of like condensation almost on the spacecraft. It'll happen on the heat shield, and it heats it up. The phenolic impregnated ablator basically burns off, right? The plasma burns off the ablator, and it shields Dragon in a cool column of gas. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still hot, right? But that cool column of gas that surrounds the capsule from the fumes coming off the heat shield, right, is enough to keep Dragon in one piece. So that's what an ablator does. It burns it off, and then it burns cold. Not like ice cold, right? But the fumes that are coming off a fire aren't as hot as the fire itself, right? So that carbon ablator is designed to burn cooler, enough to keep the structures on Dragon from melting, and obviously the people inside. Why don't they just use a rocket engine to keep it cool?
Will be making his first trip to space with the Crew-3 mission. He has extensive experience in engineering and research, and he has spent 16 consecutive days in an underwater laboratory as part of NASA's Extreme Environment Missions operations. Again, that is a preview of Crew-3, which will launch later on this fall.
Yeah.
And as we saw recently, those views inside the capsule, the crew is currently eating their last meal in space before they head home.
Oh, they're saying something. They're saying something in the loop
so
that we can't
our
hear.
next burn coming up, and our final departure burn, that's departure burn 3. That'll be at 7:14 p.m. Pacific time, so about 30 minutes from now.
No dedicated spokesperson.
That'll be
These
another
are all
combination
engineers.
of their service section and forward bulkhead.
Yo, Jesse, Andy, Kate, all the people that host the SpaceX webcast, John, they're not like PR people. They're all engineers that work at SpaceX. They're the engineers. They're the people that are out on the production lines. They take time out of their day to do this stuff. There's no PR for SpaceX. SpaceX doesn't do PR. Elon is their PR on Twitter, if you really want to know. The rest of these guys they're just engineers that hosted the webcast.
Now we are also taking questions throughout
Andy's a
the night,
production
so
engineer.
if you have any questions, use the hashtag LaunchAmerica.
So, what is a production engineer? He basically engineers the assembly lines for Falcon 9 and Dragon. A production engineer is the engineer in charge of producing. He's basically playing Kerbal and Factorio at the same time. That's his job.
Super Draco engines not used in today's missions that can be used for in-flight aborts, and those are a bit stronger and will protect the astronauts.
They're good at it because they're engineers.
On the pad during liftoff.
And Ethan wants to know if there are any cameras on the exterior of the Dragon capsule. There is a camera underneath the nose cone as well. It's a center line camera, essentially, and that helps us line up directly with the international docking adapter on that docking port. And so We use that on the way up. We haven't seen any
Yeah,
views
Paul,
of
that
it
too.
tonight, though, if you are wondering. The views that we've seen of the capsule from the exterior are from the International Space Station.
Yeah, one thing to note, as part of the undocking sequence, after we close Dragon's hatch and before we close the APAS hatch, the Crew-2 commander, Shane Kimbrough, affixed a docking target to the opposite side of the APAS hatch. So not necessarily important for the undocking portion of Crew, but definitely important for the next vehicle coming on board, so that way they know it's essentially like a crosshatch or a target, so that way their cameras can align up and know exactly where they are in relative position to the International Space Station and get a good docking procedure.
Will wants to know how hot does the inside of the capsule get during reentry, which is a great question because we've talked about how the outside reaches, it can be up to 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
So the inside is kept nice and cool.
Centigrade.
The astronauts are in their suits at that time as well, so they also have cool air flowing through their suits. And the inside of the cabin also has cool air, having been disconnected from that external radiator. And so I think it's around 85 degrees inside.
Yeah, certainly upon reentry, when the outside temperatures can get upwards of 3,000 or 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit, the inside is expected to warm up a little bit. One of the cool things is the suit itself, and again, it's hooked up to an umbilical that provides electronics and also nitrox, or a combination of nitrogen and oxygen for the astronauts to have a habitable environment. That will automatically detect if temperatures get too high and start to purge the suit, keeping the astronauts nice and cool. That way, they're not sweating on re-entry. So they should be very comfortable upon re-entry.
Yes, Limprod.
Next
How
question
about dispersing energy?
From Ty Hill. How does the orbit burn feel on the Dragon capsule?
Takes that gas away from the craft. Cool.
Well, for these burns, as we've seen, the crew are out of their seats and out of their suits, so it really doesn't feel like much is happening for them. It might feel like if you were in a car and the car started moving a little bit faster, but not necessarily so much that you'd be thrown back in your seat. Otherwise, we would have the astronauts moving in the capsule. So they don't typically feel really anything during these burns.
Mission control
One
is
thing
a
to
shift
note,
change.
particularly about the deorbit burn. So once we start it will, at the end of it, we'll be entering the Earth's atmosphere. And once we get into the atmosphere, Bob and Doug had described the Dragon sort of coming to life. And so when you get to the atmosphere, you start to hear those sounds again. There's a lot of friction and heat. But in space, the engines work a little bit differently. They sound a little bit differently. It's not like the typical combustion engine that you would hear or experience here on Earth. You actually hear sort of a clicking, and that's just the hypergolic fuel being fed into the motors. And so when the engines and these departure burns are active, the astronauts should hear sort of a clicking, and like Leah said, they'll feel the change in velocity, but not necessarily the sort of like roaring engine that you would expect
the injector
at like a Falcon 9 liftoff or something like that.
So,
and it's also
those hypergolic motors use something similar to what you'd find like as a fuel injector on a car. So an injector is just an electronic solenoid that opens and closes, and on a car it's spraying fuel into a combustion chamber and for the piston to go up and down. On a rocket, there's just two solenoids, and one has liquid fuel, the other one has oxidizer, and they just spray it. So I bet you that clicking that he's talking about is the solenoids opening and closing on the injector. So it'll sound like flipping a switch almost. I'm guessing. That's a guess, but I'm pretty sure.
Onto the recovery
I've seen
ship,
pictures of those
and,
motors
they'll
before.
Be taken
They
back
definitely
to Florida, and then board
they definitely
back
have
NASA
injector
plane
solenoids
to
on
Ellington
them.
Field.
Talks,
So
28
we expect
months.
them to get in early tomorrow morning and be able to see their family members.
And one interesting thing to note, we saw the astronauts from Crew-2 at the International Space Station this morning or this afternoon, helping the Crew-1 members get into Dragon, and they were sort of zipping around. And remember, they've only been there for about a week, and so they had described that although it's sort of like learning to walk again, you get used to it very quickly. Well, the same will happen when the astronauts return back to Earth. So they've been in microgravity for 6 months. The body will likely need some time to adjust, not only to gravity, but also the equilibrium. Microgravity gravity does
Taj, a
some
little
funky
bit.
things with your equilibrium. So one thing after splashdown, and we do recover the crew, you'll notice that they will be tended to by medical staff, and that's to make sure everything is okay, because after spending such a long time in space, the gravity can feel quite quite heavy.
And that's a great intro into this next question from Ezra, 8 years old. Hi, Ezra. Thank you so much for watching. Wanting to know how stressful it is to be in space for so long. And that's a really interesting question, and it's something that we have to think about more and more as we send crew members on long-duration missions, obviously here on the International Space Station, but as well as we think about going to the moon and Mars. So things that are very important are PMCs, or private medical conferences, and it's very common for the astronauts. It's actually on their timelines multiple times, and even on the way uphill last week with Crew 2, they had a private medical conference just to check in on how they're feeling. And so they get the opportunity to talk with a doctor here on the ground, flight surgeon, and relay any concerns that they have, either about stresses on their body and how they're feeling, or just mentally as well, just making sure that being away from home so long, they are still feeling good and able to fully give their all to the mission.
And it would be good to mention too, the astronauts have to follow a very strict schedule, right? So every day is 2 hours of exercise.
Yep.
Every 5 minutes are essentially planned for the astronauts, and they're supporting hundreds, if not thousands, of different types of experiments. And on top of that, they're getting used to the microgravity environment of space. So they are quite busy, but if the images on social media will tell anything, they seem to be very happy there. It seems like they're really happy to support all of these different scientific endeavors, and it seems like they're just having a blast. So I'm sure it balances each other out, the sort of rigorous schedule with the other side of you get to do stuff that really no one else gets to do.
And mentally as well, we want to make sure that the astronauts still have communication with their families. And so they have the opportunity weekly and multiple times a week to either do a video conference with their families as well as give them a call. So they're able to keep up with everything that's going on here on Earth. Actually heard one time about one astronaut whose son was playing hockey, and so they took the tablet to the hockey game and were recording the hockey game for the astronaut on the space station who was getting to watch it. So I love that they're able to keep in the loop like that.
Yeah. Next question from Matt. What purpose do the crew iPads or tablets serve?
They got the checklists on there.
A lot of things. It's their schedule. They can also take pictures and record a bunch of data on there to send to ground in case they need support in any type of way. But it's really, if you think about, 80 years ago, we had pen and pad, or pencil and pad, so to speak. So this is the new pencil and pad. It's how they really do work and get the schedule for the next upcoming milestones for their mission.
And even less than 30 years ago, flying the space shuttle, we had just stacks of paper that had the information for the crew. And so for this one, we can see them on the thighs of the astronauts sometimes, and that gives them the opportunity to keep up with what's next in the mission and help them monitor that.
In space, no one can hear you.
We have a next question here. It says, this is so fascinating. How many crew members are on board the Dragon? So there's currently 4. There is the commander, Mike Hopkins,
that profile
the pilot,
picture,
Victor Glover, and then we have 2 mission specialists, Shannon Walker and Soichi Noguchi.
That profile picture, though.
So these 4 are returning home after their 6-month journey. We also sent 4 as part of the Crew 2 program last week. The Dragon capsule itself can fit up to 7, although we've never launched that many people as part of the capsule program. When we did the Down 2 mission with Bob and Doug, we just sent them, and so there was some empty space in the capsule as well.
Come on, man.
Kassara asks, what is the big loop? That's a great question. We've heard a lot of that talk from the Corps here, reporting to Dragon on the big loop, or reporting to or the crew members reporting back on the big loop. And that's when the communication is being routed through the International Space Station as well. So we heard that big loop was recently cut, and so Crew Dragon is speaking directly to the ground now and not really using the International Space Station for that. They're not in the mix anymore, I guess I should say, on
playing that again?
loop or chat line.
Yeah, and you'll hear a lot of communications back and forth between the ground team and the astronauts. You know, there are a lot of milestones and checkpoints to make sure that everything goes smoothly. So over communication is certainly good. And you'll hear the beeps too, and those are Quindar tones.
All right, fine.
There's only 4. There is the commander, Mike Hopkins, the pilot, Victor Glover, and then we have 2 mission specialists, Shannon Walker and Soichi Noguchi.
What the hell?
The question is, at what point in the mission is the trunk jettisoned? That is a great question. So currently it's scheduled for 10:58 p.m. Pacific time, so just about 4 hours from now. So after we complete our departure burn, the astronauts will don their suits again and prepare for re-entry. So there's an umbilical that connects the trunk to the capsule and routes telemetry and power. And one of the things that we want to make sure happens before we re-enter is we want to shed as much unneeded weight as possible to give the parachutes an easier time to do their job and slow the vehicle down. So we'll start to burn up unnecessary fuel. We'll
I'm gonna use the bathroom.
and then we'll also jettison the trunk. And after the deorbit burn, we're burning the extra propellant, and the trunk is jettisoned. The weight of the vehicle, the mass of the vehicle, actually goes from 27,000 pounds to 21,000 pounds. So that's 6,000 pounds that, you know, the drogue chutes and the main chutes don't have to sort of slow down. So that is important for us.
And to be specific, as you mentioned, that umbilical, we call it claw separation. And so that disconnects the thermal control power and telemetry from Dragon to the trunk. And then the spacecraft, the capsule itself will separate from the trunk. And this all happens before the deorbit burn. So that comes on later in the mission, but before we really commit to coming home. And we're continuing to take your questions with the hashtag #AskNASA. Just a little look back on the things that we've seen so far. The call to, or the command for undocking came right on time at 5:30 p.m. Pacific time, so just about an hour and a half ago, and we had physical separation of the vehicle just a few minutes later. Everything has been really on the timeline since then. We've completed 3 of those departure burns, and we're now waiting for the 4th, which should come in less than 20 minutes from now, around 7:14 p.m. Pacific time.
This is an animation of the 4 burns. So we've completed 3 so far, and again, waiting on the 4th one. Once we get to the 4th one, we're basically going to be co-elliptic with the space station about 10 kilometers beneath it. And then we'll move on to the deorbit burn in a couple hours, and that will lower the orbit altitude enough where Dragon will start to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere, eventually make its way through the atmosphere, deploy its drogue chutes first, slowing the vehicle and stabilizing it, then eventually the main chutes, and then we'll have splashdown off the coast of, right now, the primary site of Panama City, Florida.
So when Crew Dragon begins that deorbit burn, it'll still be traveling about 17,500 miles an hour orbital velocity, and that burn will help it drop out of orbit and into the Earth's atmosphere, slowing it down to about 350 miles per hour. At that point is when those drogue chutes will deploy once Crew Dragon reaches 18,000 feet above the Earth. And those drogue chutes slowly deploy will slow Crew Dragon down to about 119 miles per hour, and then we'll see those 4 main chutes. And those main chutes don't inflate right away. Same thing with those drogue chutes. We'll see it take just a few seconds for them to fully inflate, and we don't want to cause any shock to the vehicle or the parachute system. So it takes its time to inflate a little bit, but after that, the Crew Dragon should be sailing about 16 miles per hour for a nice calm splashdown just off the coast of Panama City, Florida.
After splashdown, recovery operations begin.
What do
so
we got?
A couple of things will happen. There are 2 fast boats, and they Earth's atmosphere, eventually make its way through the atmosphere, deploy its drogue chutes first, slowing the
They're
vehicle and
landing right by my
stabilizing it.
mouth, cruise
Then
ships.
eventually the main chutes, and then we'll have splashdown off the coast of right now the primary vapors, which can be toxic to people. Once that is all cleared, the second boat will come in and make sure that the chutes are no longer attached. If they were attached,
Now-
we could run.
Now, fellas, don't get me wrong. One of the landing sites, and just this is added capability for Dragon, is off the coast of Jacksonville, is in the Atlantic Ocean. They can land in the Gulf or they can land in the Atlantic, either one.
Hoist it onto the back of the boat. More checkouts will happen, and then eventually the crew will open the hatch and say hi to the crew. One of the first people that will talk to the crew is medical staff and make sure that everything is good from that standpoint. And then they'll be moved to a
Dragon SpaceX for a couple of items.
Florida doesn't want them. You know why? Because it's not a space shuttle. The only spaceships that land in Florida are space shuttles, man. Capsules? No. Space shuttles? Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
The ground is go for
Yes,
departure
Reagan.
3. Also, friendly reminder that you may now begin your fluid loading per your timeline. And you may
yes.
also complete
Fluid
sections
loading.
3 and 4 of procedure 4.700 at your
Like whisk
convenience.
jockey.
Okay, go for the burn, depart 3 burn. We are go to start fluid loading and go for sections 3 and 4 of 4.700.
Good read back.
We heard the crew members get the go for depart burn 3. That's the final of these 4 departure burns, but certainly not the last burn we'll see today. And we expect to see departure burn 3 coming up in about 13 minutes from now, around 7:14 p.m. Pacific time or 2:14 GMT. We also, sorry.
Sorry, I was
That's correct,
trying to finish
Suna.
my thoughts. So after the medical staff says hi to the crew, there's actually a medical portion of the medical section dedicated on the portion of the vessel, and the crew will continue further checkouts to make sure everything is good, and then start to make their way back to land. That's going to be the first time they're getting a breath of fresh air in over 6 months, which is probably certainly pretty exciting for them.
And when we had 3 crew members return earlier this month on Soyuz, I love the look on their faces whenever they are pulled out of the capsule for the first time and they have sunlight on their face and fresh air from the world around them. So I know it has to be exciting. And once, as you mentioned, the first people to really speak with.
I mean, imagine being inside for that long and then not going outside at all. Like, wait, you can't imagine that. Never mind.
Capsule. They will be loaded onto stretchers.
did that on
This is
purpose.
because they have been in space for the past 6 months, and it can be a little bit difficult to walk. It's not that they couldn't, but we want to make sure, especially while on a boat, that
Too
they
soon, man,
are
too
stable
soon.
and that they're comfortable. So they will get some medical checkouts aboard the boat itself, and then take that helicopter
They have 3
back
or
to
4
Florida
right now,
before
Clayton.
boarding
I'm
a
not
NASA
sure how many
plane for
total.
Houston.
Right, the
Too much.
stretcher
Sorry, Sal.
is very similar to like the chairs that you'll see propped up after a land.
When the Russians do a return, where do they splash down? So Soyuz is designed to land on land. It can land on water, but it's designed to land primarily on land. They land on the Kazakh steppe near a city in Kazakhstan called Jizkizgan. And yeah, Soyuz lands out in a field basically. The northeastern parts of Kazakhstan are like the prairie. It's very, very flat. So Soyuz lands out there. It does have alternative splashdown sites if the poop hits the fan. But they aim for Jezkazgan usually, which is it's northeast of Baikonur where they take off from.
The journey of Crew Dragon, but they will need to get back in those suits and seats before our departure burn later on.
We have another question here from Greg. How many G's do the astronauts feel when entering the Earth's atmosphere?
I know
So
the
we
answer.
expect them to feel about 3 to 5 Gs. So nothing unbearable, maybe even 3 Gs. Maybe you felt it on a roller coaster before. And as Andy mentioned, is pretty similar to what they experience on ascent as well. But of course, having experienced practically 0 Gs over the last few months, that can be a little taxing. And so we heard them discuss fluid loading and how they go for fluid loading. And this helps combat any maybe potential orthostatic intolerance or essentially dizziness that can occur as the blood rushes away from the head once you return to a gravity environment.
Yeah.
We also got to look at the crew in those comfort garments, which are also compression garments, essentially, orthostatic garments. Those squeeze the legs and the lower half of the body to keep fluids moving into the upper part of the body. So it all helps our crew members feel better on the way down.
I
Ryan.
just looked up the highest G-force experience on a roller coaster. It's 12. So actually, if you've ridden some really intense roller coasters, you're probably going to experience more Gs than what the astronauts experience, maybe for a shorter duration.
12.
But yeah, I was not
Yeah, but
expecting
is it
that answer.
lateral
12
Gs?
Gs out there is the record for highest G-forces in a roller coaster.
We have a question from Jamie asking, the astronauts usually have to sleep shift for the trip up. Did they have to sleep shift for the trip home? Great question. It all depends on really the timeline.
Well, G-forces are funny. Sustained 12 Gs would, yeah. Sustained 12 Gs would hurt. Sustained negative 12 Gs will kill you. Sustained lateral 12 Gs also that would hurt. Yeah, you'd feel it. 4 Gs, 12 Gs, for a second when you're going around a corner on a roller coaster, nah, you're fine. Sustained, it's the sustained stuff that'll kill you. And then negative Gs, if all the blood goes to your head and all the blood pools up here, if the blood pools up here, that means it's not pooling in your heart, and your heart is the fuel pump. There, that's the pump. You need that. If you don't get fuel, if you don't get blood back to this thing, that's bad. Negative Gs aren't good for you. Really not good for you. So the Gs that the astronauts will experience, because the capsule's flying heat shield first, is deceleration. So it's gonna, what is it? They're going to be pushed into their seats, right? So it'll push you this way. You'll feel it.
To last 3 days and sort of retarget another landing in that time period. So even though things continue to look good, and as Steve Stitch had said earlier, the winds are about 3 miles an hour at the primary landing site, and the seas are in a glass-like state, so waves are just about 1 foot tall. Pretty much ideal conditions. Things continue to look good, but weather is
Pretty
weather.
Sure they did RTR.
In the event that things do shift, we do have some potential alternate paths that the crew could take, and there are supplies on board the Dragon spacecraft for them to be fine while orbiting the Earth for that duration.
Next question is from James. Do they keep a medical person continuously on the space station? And you can ask these questions with the hashtag #LaunchAmerica if you're on Twitter. And I am sure that they would love to have a medical person continuously on the space station, but that's just not the case, unfortunately. However, they do have constant communications with the ground. As we mentioned, Mission Control is staffed 365 days a year, and part of those times we have a flight surgeon in the room, and they are always on call if the crew were to need to speak with someone. So they have all had training for various medical conditions, but there is not a specific designated medical person on board. As we did see, though, Maurer, who's flying this fall, was a medical doctor first, and so essentially that is like having a doctor on board.
Each of the astronauts do get assigned specific medical staff for their duration and their mission. So when we're talking about the private medical conferences or the PMCs that all the astronauts have regularly, it is the same person, so they can assess their health from last week to now and so on and so forth, to make sure that there aren't any negative trends and they can be treated if needed appropriately.
That's right.
And I just misspoke. I have to correct myself. It was Tom Marshburn is the medical doctor. So,
okay. Yeah, that is quite nice to sort of be an.
Celtic, what did you say? I'm glad you're back on. Do me a favor. I've walked into 3 of my favorite streamers today that really haven't been well. I'm hoping you're still doing good today. By the way, thanks for the coverage and the space stuff as always. You rock. My daughter is pissed, 11 years old, that I'm watching you without her. Oh, gosh. Heard you in the background. Oh. Well, Celtic, tell her it's past her bedtime. She got to go to sleep. You got to sleep. I'll be here when you wake up. Seriously, I will. You know,
There's lower than
it's
it
not
the entire
bullcrap,
way around
you know?
the Earth. And then a few hours after that, we'll have claw separation.
I mean, Celtic, dude, I'm not going to sit here and say, like, allergies aren't kicking my butt right now. I haven't slept in a little while. I haven't gotten good sleep in a little while. You can tell, but hey, you're only going to see Crew 1 come down once. Gotta be here, man. I gotta be here for this, dude. This, like, come on, I wouldn't miss this for the world. Wait. But yeah, no, I appreciate those kind words, man. Yeah, we're gonna play Hunt the Streamer in probably about 20 minutes. Guys, we're gonna do some rounds of Hunt the Streamer, and then I'm going to switch right back to the coverage, right, basically deorbit burn all the way down. Yeah, Jeffrey, I know. Got a solid headache from my second dose, but no way I'm missing this. I mean, Jake, yeah, the second one, people have been telling me, really, really kicks your butt. But yeah, dude, I don't know, man. And I don't know if this is the right way to say this, I guess. I know there's people that watch the stream that you expect me to be here. You expect me to be here, and you guys pay my salary. Now, I'm not trying to reduce it to just like, you pay me money, so I have to be here out of obligation. I love what I freaking do. I love this. This is the best job ever. But it does require a lot of work. However, I'm sure there are harder jobs out there. Like, this job is work. I'm sure there's somebody here watching that has a much tougher job than I do. But, you know, I gotta be here. I have to be here. That's not even a judgment call, man. I have to be here. Interesting, Hibbit. I'm gonna need you to come in on Saturday. I've been coming in on Saturday for the past frickin' 5 years, Franco. What do you want from me? and sometimes on Sunday as well. Hey, JFK, what's up? So, she's at a dance competition. They kind of don't have a bedtime. Oh, all right. Well, I just assumed that was the reason. Sorry, man. Both my kids watch a stream for lunches. I'm pretty sure you work your butt off for the content you provide. Celtic, I believe in hard work. It's just how I roll. I work my tail off, dude. Like, you're right. But that's the thing, man. I don't like sitting here saying, "Oh yeah, I work real hard for you guys. Pay me money." Like, no, I just do it. I just do it, you know. Gracias, Squall. Carry on, my wayward son. There will be peace when you are done streaming. Lay your weary head to rest and try to sleep. You won't sleep, no. What would you say you do here? Yeah, like, no, I gotta be here for this stuff, dudes. I love this stuff. This stuff's great, man. Whatever I can do to help people understand space better, that's my... That's what I'm good at, man. I'm good at explaining this stuff. I don't freaking know why. Like, I didn't just decide I was going to be good at explaining rocket science to people. Like, that's just kind of something that happened. So, if I'm good at it, why the heck would I take my foot off the gas pedal? Your TPS reports are due. Yeah, so, I mean, Celtic, like, allergies have been kicking my butt, man. You see me, I've been sneezing like crazy on stream. I get less sleep than I already do. I don't know, I slept for like maybe 5 hours last night and like 3 the night before. Seriously, I'm up. I'm up at all, like, I'm always up. You can message me. Sometimes people shoot me messages in Discord by accident. Like, and they're like, oh, sorry, that meant to go to somebody else. And I sit there and I'm like, hey, how you doing? And they're like, why are you awake? I'm like, because I've lost control of my life. No. Why are you making pudding at 3 a.m.? Because I've lost control of my life. You know? No. Oh, hi, my pick. What's new with you? Dude, I was sitting there watching that guy rebuild the engine. I'm like, this is nice. Oh, I got a message. It might be important. Shut up and take my money. Burning a Wigaboard? I've been grinding in GTA, and that song's been on the whole time. Kansas is a great band, dude. Or was a great band. I'm not a religious person, but if there's a higher power that puts you on this planet to be a space nutcase and let everybody know it and maybe educate them sometimes too. If so, there's a God with a sick sense of humor, but I like it. Yeah. The Lord works in mysterious ways. Nah, SN15's on Monday, Klein.
Astronauts will put their
I'm
suits
making
back
stewed
on
pickles
and do some
at
leak
3
checks
a.m.
and then start
Nice,
to prepare
Guju.
for
Somebody got it.
deorbit.
Shut up and take my
eventual
money.
Rendezvous and return back to Earth.
I can't swallow
And
that.
Department
Good
3
news!
is
It's a
underway.
suppository.
We are waiting for confirmation of a successful burn, the fourth and final depart burn this evening.
Dragon, SpaceX, burn complete, nominal burn.
Okay.
Okay, and resilience copies, nominal burn, and that went a little bit longer than expected. That was what you guys were expecting, huh?
Checking.
Yeah, no problem, my pick.
Yep, that was just as we expected.
Dude, I'm awake at that hour almost every night, dude. I don't.
Okay, copy on.
Okay, the departure burn 3 was good. Guys, I don't know. It's very rare that I get more than 8 hours. Very rare. Usually about 5 to 6. That's usually what I run off. Just, I mean, I'm sitting here sometimes it gets really bad because sometimes I'm nursing coffee till like 10, 11 at night. That's not good. I gotta make sure that I finish this. I gotta make sure I finish this before like 8 o'clock, and we're good now, but sometimes I just sit there and I sip on it, and I sip on it till the very end of the stream. Sometimes I have coffee left over. That's bad. I really won't sleep if I do that. Oh my goodness. I've been at Deep Barracle, literally no internet for 3 weeks. There are 5 people on Twitch. I just go, oh. I'd go, oh, that was the resub. I'll have to have there. Who cares if I ever get to say so? Grab Bro Stream rocks. Right on, man. Thanks.
Keep sending in those questions with the hashtag #LaunchAmerica.
Are you covering Splashdown? Yeah, we'll go all the way to Splashdown. We should start to get ready for Hunt the Streamer tonight, guys. Coffee in my hands doesn't last 10 minutes. I mean, sometimes, Dan, I chug that stuff because I need it, man. Anyway, I think that's actually probably a good time after that last deorbit burn. It's going to be a little bit. It's going to be a little bit before they go through the next phases. So I'm going to switch us over to GTA here. And we'll start getting ready for Hunt the Streamer, guys. And then I will be back for the landing and recovery of the capsule. So all right, I'm gonna switch us over to GTA now. Sadly, caffeine has little effect on me. I can drink an energy drink to shake off the tiredness, and I feel asleep shortly after. AG, you shouldn't feel like a rush from caffeine. Take it from somebody that drinks a ton of it. You shouldn't feel anything from caffeine. It'll just keep you awake. That's it. You shouldn't be like, oh, yeah, I'm good. That's not... If you did that, you drank too much caffeine. You drank too much. You should just feel awake. That's it. You should just be awake. It
Yes,
doesn't
Referee.
improve
No
your
throttle.
cognitive function. It's not some freaking miracle drug.